Chapter 8. I stirred from the couch, groggy and disorientated, the weight of sleep still clinging to me. Jack's voice broke through the haze, low and firm. "Are we all ready?" I blinked to shake off the grogginess as the reality of what was about to happen hit me like a punch to the gut. It was time. No turning back now. I sat up, rubbing my eyes, slowly becoming more aware of the room. Lila was already on her feet, pulling her jacket on, her face set with quiet determination. Darwin was in the kitchen, rummaging through his bag. Jack stood by the door, arms crossed, ready to lead the charge. I let out a breath, my heart beginning to pick up speed as I dragged myself off the couch. As I stretched my stiff limbs, I glanced at the window. The storm had quietened. No more flashes of lightning or booming thunder. The world outside had settled into an eerie calm. Just thick fog now, swirling in the glow of the street lights. It was like the storm had been sucked into the earth and spat back out as a different kind of danger. "This is it," Jack said again, his voice sharper this time, pulling my focus back. I nodded, feeling the tension in the air thicken as the others gathered near the door. I walked to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to peek out. The street was barely visible through the dense fog, the streetlights casting pale, ghostly halos that only seemed to make the darkness thicker. Above, the full moon hung low in the sky, its light straining to break through the mist, casting long shadows across the empty street. Everything was still, deathly still. I turned back to the group. "All right," I muttered, grabbing my jacket, the cold weight of the night settling over my shoulders. "Let's do it." The door creaked as Jack pulled it open, and the moment we stepped outside, the change in the air hit me. It felt like we were walking into something that didn't want to let us out. We moved in silence, each step feeling heavier than the last as we made our way to the car. Lila climbed in the back, followed by Darwin, while Jack and I slid into the front. I turned the key, the car's engine sputtering to life, breaking the uneasy quiet. We drove in silence. My hands were tight on the wheel, knuckles pale in the dim light as I kept my eyes fixed on the road ahead. The air felt so heavy, like we'd crossed into something dark, something that didn't want us here. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Lila sat in the back, her face just barely visible, eyes wide as she stared out into the dark. Darwin was next to her, silent, his fingers drumming nervously on his knee. Jack, in the passenger seat, was stiff, his jaw set, eyes glued to the road ahead. He didn't look at me, didn't say a word. We all knew what was coming. Or at least, we thought we did. The last few familiar houses quickly faded behind us, swallowed quickly by the unholy fog as we drove deeper into the woods. It was like entering another realm. The road narrowed, winding through the towering pines that seemed to stretch endlessly upward, their branches scraping the sky. The moon was hanging low and pale amidst the fog, but its lights barely made a dent in the darkness. In that moment, I thought I saw something. For a second, out of the corner of my eye, just beyond the reach of the headlights, two white dots, like how the eyes of an animal reflect light, gleaming through the trees, staring right at me. I turned my head quickly, but they were gone. Just shadows, just trees. "Get it together," I muttered under my breath. I hadn't slept much, and it was messing with my head, or at least that's what I told myself. But there was something about this entire area, this night, that gnawed at my nerves. It just felt wrong. We passed deeper into the forest, and the trees seemed to close in around us, their nailed branches reaching toward the car like skeletal hands. The road grew narrower, and the fog clung to the ground like it didn't want to let us go. Every turn felt like it was leading us deeper into the labyrinth of wet bark. As we followed the winding road through the forest, the pine trees that had lined the road for miles suddenly gave way to an even more unsettling landscape. There was a sharp left turn, a narrow, almost hidden path that broke off from the main road, barely wide enough for a car. It felt off, like we weren't supposed to see it. Seeing the same trail at night made it instantly more eerie than in the day. I gripped the steering wheel as we made the turn, and the shift in the atmosphere was instant. The familiar pine trees thinned out and were replaced by enormous oaks, ancient and gnarled, their massive trunks twisted together, their bare branches stretched out like withered arms. They created an archway over the path, so dense that only slivers of moonlight managed to pierce through. The further we drove, the more alien the landscape became, like we had left the forest behind and entered something older, more sinister. It wasn't just the oaks. The air felt different here, heavier, colder. The fog clung to the trees, wrapping itself around their trunks and limbs like it was trying to suffocate them. I could see the cars struggling against the uneven dirt path as we moved deeper, each bump jarring the silence inside the vehicle. No one said a word, but I could feel the shift. The quiet determination that had pushed us this far was slowly unraveling, being replaced with something else. Dread. Ahead, the silhouette of the house started to take shape. It wasn't sudden, but gradual, like the fog was pulling back just enough to reveal it, bit by bit. It loomed ahead, seemingly taller than before. The moonlight barely touched it, casting deep shadows across the structure, making it look like something out of a nightmare. No lights shone from the windows. They were black and hollow, as if the house itself was a void swallowing everything around it. I slowed the car, pulling to a stop well before the driveway. We weren't about to park any closer than we had to. There was something about getting too close, about the idea of stepping out right in front of that house that made my stomach twist. For a moment, no one moved. The silence in the car was suffocating, and I could feel the weight of what we were about to do sinking in. The plan had felt so clear, so necessary, when we were talking about it. But now, sitting here in the shadow of that house, with the fog robbing us of sight and security, that determination was gone, swallowed by the overwhelming fear that crept into my bones. I glanced at the others. Lila sat rigid, staring at the house, her face pale and drawn. Darwin had gone still, his hands frozen in place, resting on the door handle like he wasn't sure if he could open it. And there was Jack. Jack, who had been so full of fire and purpose, looked different now. His jaw was still clenched, his brow furrowed, but when I met his eyes, I saw it. The fear. He was scared. We all were. The oppressive feeling in the air seemed to thicken the closer we got, seeping through the car's windows and walls. I could almost feel it pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. My breath fogged the glass and I leaned forward, staring out at the house through the windshield. Everything around us was quiet, too quiet. Even the wind had died, leaving only the sound of my own breathing and the low, steady hum of the car's engine. "We're really doing this," I said, more to myself than to anyone else. "Can't go back now," Darwin replied with a sigh. Jack was the first to move, pushing open his door with a loud creak. The sound seemed too loud in the stillness, echoing in the dead silence of the night. One by one, the others followed suit. I got out last, the cold night air hitting me like a wave, sharp and biting against my skin. As I stood here, staring at the house, I could still feel the fear settling deeper in my gut. I looked around again, trying to shake the feeling that we were being watched. My eyes darted to the trees, to the shadows that seemed to shift and flicker in the corner of my vision. And then, for a brief second, I thought I saw them again. Those white, piercing eyes, hidden just beyond the tree line, watching. But when I turned to look directly, there was nothing. I wasn't the only one who felt it. I could see it in the way Lila wrapped her arms around herself, the way Darwin glanced nervously toward the woods, and even in Jack's stiff posture, his fingers flexing and unflexing like he was trying to shake something off. The determination that had driven us this far had been replaced by something else. Something darker. Something far more fearful. The second I stepped out of the car, a wave of freezing air slammed into me. It was like the temperature had dropped 20 degrees in an instant, and the chill bit into my skin, making my breath come out in thick, heavy clouds. Every exhale felt like smoke, hanging in the air, lingering unnaturally long before fading into the fog. The night had been cold before, yet bearable. Now, as I stood here, it felt like the dead of winter, and it didn't make sense. It shouldn't be this cold. It felt unnatural. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, glancing at the others. It was like we crossed into a different climate, one where warmth had no influence. The first thing that struck me, though, wasn't just the cold. It was the silence, the absolute smothering silence that wrapped itself around us as soon as we got out. There were no insects chirping, no wind rustling through the trees, not even the distant call of a bird. It was as if the whole world had been muted. I strained my ears, trying to catch something, anything, but there was nothing. The only sound was the faint crunch of our footsteps on the gravel road as we browsed, and even that seemed too loud, too intrusive, like it didn't belong here. And at the house, God, that house, it loomed ahead of us, towering and dark, almost blending into the night sky. There were no lights on inside, no flickers of warmth or life from behind those windows. It was just a black silhouette, barely visible through the fog that seemed to hang around the property like a shroud. I had been here before. Looking at it now, in the dead of night, it looked different, bigger somehow, more menacing, like it had grown overnight. Jack stepped closer, peering up at the shadowy stone walls of the house. "Looks like you were right," he muttered, nodding toward Lila. "Nobody home." "No," he answered. There was something about that place that choked the words right out of you, leaving only that gnawing, deafening silence. It wasn't just the fact that the house was dark. The whole place felt dead. I hadn't noticed it before, but now, standing here in the freezing air, I realized how wrong it felt. It was like we were the only living things for miles, like we'd wandered into some forgotten corner of the world where time and life had stopped. As I stood there, trying to make sense of it all, my eyes drifted upward. And that's when I saw them. Crows. Only 5 of them this time, to be exact, perched along the roof, their black shapes barely visible against the night sky. They were perfectly still, not a feather moving, their eyes locked onto us with an unnerving intensity. I'd seen crows before, but these weren't acting like normal birds, not even close. They weren't flapping or hopping around like crows usually do. They just sat there, staring, unblinking, as if they'd been waiting for us to arrive. I felt an icy chill slither up my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. Those birds, there was something off about them. I didn't know exactly what it was, but the way they were watching us, the way they didn't move in the slightest, it was like they were more than just birds, like they knew something we didn't, almost as if something was watching us through their eyes. I wanted to say something, to ask if anyone else was seeing this, but before I could get the words out, the unmistakable sound of a shotgun being loaded shattered the silence. I flinched, turning quickly. Jack stood by the car, pumping another shell into the chamber with a calmness that was questionable. Darwin shot him a look, eyebrows raised. "You packed a shotgun for this." Jack, still focused on the gun, didn't look up. Always be prepared for anything, he said, his tone as casual as if we were going camping. Darwin let out a disbelieving chuckle. Not even a handgun? You know, something that doesn't make us all deaf if you were to shoot that thing inside? Jack finally looked up, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Handguns are for guys compensating. I don't need to compensate. I just like things that match. Darwin shook his head, half smiling, but still clearly uneasy. Jack, without missing a beat, turned toward the house, slinging the shotgun over his shoulder. Come on then, he muttered. Let's get this over with. We started moving toward the house, and with every step we took, the silence seemed to deepen. Our footsteps on the gravel sounded unnaturally loud, almost like echoes in a canyon. It only made the emptiness around us feel even more suffocating. I could hear my heart beating in my chest, the thud of it seeming to fill the void around us. We approached the front door, a massive weathered thing made of dark mahogany that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The brass door handles were shaped like wolf heads, their mouths open, frozen in snarls. They were the kind of handles you had to grab and pull with force, the kind that would make a loud, heavy sound when they would strike the door. Jack was the first to try pry the door open. Nothing. Locked, of course. Darwin muttered something under his breath as we gathered around, wondering how the hell we were going to get inside. I glanced over my shoulder at the trees, feeling that breath of anxiety creeping back in. The crows had moved now. They were all sat firmly on the roof of my car, still frozen and staring directly at us. I tried to ignore them and turned toward the others. Maybe we could try, I began, half thinking we could find another entrance or maybe a window to pry open. But before I could finish, the crack of wood splintered through the air. Jack, with no hesitation, had slammed the butt of his shotgun into the door. The loud crack of the impact echoed through the silent forest, the heavy wood groaning under the blow. He drew back and hit again, harder this time. Jesus, Jack, Darwin muttered, stepping back. There was a final sharp crack, and the door gave way, swinging open just enough to reveal the pitch-black void inside. Lila, shaking her head, shot him a glare. Really, Jack? Now they're gonna obviously know someone's been here. How are we supposed to be discreet when they find their fucking front door caved in? Jack, not even breaking a sweat, rested the shotgun on his shoulder and smirked. Sometimes, you've got to just ask nicely. The rest of us exchanged uneasy glances, the last shred of any normalcy we'd had disappearing with the broken door. The freezing wind seemed to pour from inside, colder than it had been outside, which seemed impossible, biting into my skin as if the house itself was welcoming us with open, icy arms. I could see my breath more clearly now, and as I stepped inside, the temperature seemed to drop even further. The cold wrapped around me like a heavy blanket, seeping into my bones, and the first thing that hit me was the smell. It wasn't overpowering, but it was there, faint, like a mix of lavender and something else, something old and musty, like a place that hadn't been touched in decades. It was difficult to describe. It reminded me of the kind of smell you get in an old library, or maybe a funeral home. We stepped into the grand foyer, and I felt the weight of the place settle over me like a lead blanket. It was huge, far more expansive than it had any right to be. Tall ceilings stretched up into darkness, intricate wooden beams crisscrossed the lease, their carvings almost lost in shadow. Dust hung in the air, caught in the narrow beams of our flashlights. Everything looked old. Victorian-style furniture sat around the house, massive mirrors with frames so ornate they seemed like something out of a museum. Chandeliers hung overhead, but they were dark, their crystals dull, lifeless and covered in cobwebs. "This place is magnificent," Lila whispered, her voice barely audible in the silence. Her flashlight played along the walls, catching the fine details of the architecture. The way the wood had been carved so delicately it almost seemed alive. But the awe in her voice couldn't hide the undercurrent of fear. It was beautiful, yes, but there was something deeply wrong with it, like a painting that was just a little off. The colors too dark, the proportions too strange. We moved deeper into the house, our footsteps on the hardwood floor echoing in the cavernous silence. As we walked, I couldn't help but think how loud we were. Every creak of the floorboards, every shuffle of our shoes, seemed to reverberate through, making it feel like the house itself was listening, waiting. As we reached the corridor that led to the spiral staircase, as soon as we entered it, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Down here," I said in a whisper. Although the house was unoccupied, I still felt compelled to stay as silent as possible. As we continued down the room, the floor groaning beneath us with every step, my flashlight caught something ahead, and I recognized them immediately. Those damned portraits. The 4 children of the family staring out from their frames at us like ghosts. I can still remember their names. I didn't even have to read the small intricate writing at the bottom. Cedric, Edward, Marlowe, and Elizabeth. All 4 of their pale faces staring back at me from the canvas, their eyes cold, emotionless. My breath hitched, and for a moment I forgot the others were even there. I couldn't help but be brought back to the time when I first saw these things and thought how old and aged they were. Yet I'd met 3 of the 4 children recently, and they look identical to their ghostly selves within the withered portraits. I instantly blinked back to reality when Jack's voice echoed down the corridor from further up. "Creepy little bastards, aren't they?" I didn't answer. None of us did. We just kept moving, the floor creaking beneath our feet as we approached the spiral staircase. It wound downward, underground, the steps carved from stone, the banister made of wrought iron that had been twisted into intricate, almost delicate patterns. The air coming from below was even coldy, and I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me as I peered into the black oblivion that awaited us beneath this house. Darwin hesitated at the top of the stairs, his hand gripping the banister tight. "That where she is?" he asked, his voice small as he looked down. "This isn't a good idea." Jack shot him a hard look. "For Christ's sake, you want us to hold your hand as well, Darwin?" he said aloud, too loud for my comfort, slinging his shotgun over his shoulder. "It's just a cellar, not the gates of hell. Grow a pair, will you?" Darwin shifted awkwardly, but didn't argue. The weight of Jack's words in the presser was enough to put him in a reluctant silence. Lila and I stayed quiet and watched as Jack was the first with his torch to begin descending down the spiral stairs. I swallowed hard and followed, the cold stone under my feet sending a fresh wave of unease through me. The deeper we went, the more the house seemed to close in around us. The walls pressed in, the silence growing heavier. The stone walls were rough, jagged, and damp to the touch, but they hadn't felt the slightest hint of warmth in centuries. The smell of mildew clung to everything, clinging with the faint, sour stench of decay. I ran my hand along the wall for balance and recoiled slightly. It was slick with moisture, a thin film of moss coating the stones. Between the cracks in the ancient stonework, thick black spiders crouched, their legs twitching faintly in the shadows as our torchlight passed over them. The beam of light flickered briefly, and I could swear I saw one of them retreat deeper into the crevice. The staircase wound tighter as we descended, the sound of our footsteps on the old stone steps, the only sound cutting through the silence. Even our breaths felt muted, absorbed by the thick, damp air. The railing was cold and slick beneath my hand, and I imagined how many had gripped it before us, if anyone had come down here at all. The walls felt like they were closing in, narrowing the farther down we went. The air grew thicker, more oppressive, as if the house itself didn't want us here. The only net with sound was the occasional scuttling of spiders within the cracks. Finally, we reached the bottom. The spiral staircase unfurled into a wide, narrow cellar. It stretched out in front of us like the jaws of some enormous beast, lined with rows upon rows of old wine racks, their contents long forgotten, collecting dust. The place had the look of something untouched for decades, maybe longer. Bottles sat in their nests of cobwebs, labels worn and faded, the wood of the rack swollen with rot. The cold was unbearable now. My breath came out in thick clouds of white, lingering out in the air like smoke. I shivered, pulling my jacket tighter as I glanced around. There was no light source, no sound, only the echo of our steps as we stood there, staring down the long, narrow cellar that led to the stone door. The air was thick with dust and mold, a damp, musty smell that clawed at the back of my throat with every breath. It smelt like rot, like things left long in the untended shadows. Jack moved ahead, his torch beam cutting through the stale air, the only light in the suffocating blackness. His shotgun rested on his shoulder, the metallic clink of its movements the only other sound. He glanced back at us, his face half hidden in the shadows. "Smells like something pegged it down here," he muttered, voice low. Lila wrinkled her nose. Something probably did. As we made our way further down the cellar, the narrow space seemed to stretch endlessly before us. The wine racks became fewer, replaced by old barrels and crates stacked against the stone walls. The faint scurrying of rats, or maybe something worse, echoed from the darkness, just out of sight. My skin crawled, the weight of the silence pressing in around us. I kept my eyes forward, though part of me wanted to glance back. It felt like we were being watched, like the cellar itself was alive. Every creak, every scrape of our feet on the cobblestones felt too loud, too intrusive. It was all as if the cellar was holding its breath. And then, at the far end of the cellar, we saw it. The door. A massive stone door, nearly 8 feet high, loomed at the end of the cellar, its surface covered in strange, archaic symbols etched into the stone. They seemed to glow faintly in the torchlight, casting eerie, shifting shadows across the walls. The door was secured with the same thick, heavy chains crisscrossed in an X formation, each link impossibly large. And in the center was an equally massive lock. We stopped in front of it, staring at the ominous barrier that stood between us and whatever lay beyond. "That's it," I whispered, my voice tight with anxiety. She's in there." Jack didn't wait a second longer. He stepped forward and banged his fist against the stone. "Hello? Anyone down there? Sweetheart, we're here to get you out." His voice echoed through the shaft, bouncing off the walls. But the only response was silence. I moved closer to the chains, running my hand along one of the links. It was thick and cold, unnaturally so, even in the chill of the cellar. As I lifted the chain higher into the light, something caught my eye. The metal wasn't the dull gray of steel. It was silver. This isn't steel," I said, frowning. "This is silver. Why would they use silver?" Lila stepped closer, peering at the chains. "Silver? Why silver for a chain this big?" "No idea," I said, letting the chain fall back into place with a soft clink. Silver wasn't practical for this kind of thing. Too soft, too expensive, and yet, here it was, securing the door, as though whoever locked it wanted to keep something very specific contained. Before I could dwell on it too long on that unsettling thought, Jack cut in. "Does it matter?" he grunted, already rummaging through his bag. Locked is locked. He pulled out a massive pair of bolt cutters, big enough to snap through the big chain. Silhouette. Now step back. He brought the cutters down hard on the chain, and the sound of metal striking metal reverberated through the cellar like a gunshot. The echo bounced off the stone walls, loud enough to make my ears ring. Each swing of the cutters was like a crack of thunder in the suffocating silence, setting my nerves on edge. My hands were clammy, and my heart thudded against my ribs as if it was trying to escape. "Jesus, Jack, could you be any louder?" Dawn muttered, casting anxious glances down the cellar into the darkness. Jack grunted, bringing the cutters down again with a sharp clang. "If you want it done quicker, feel free to jump in." The tension between us was almost palpable now. Every clang of the cutters against the chain was a jarring reminder that we were running out of time. The cellar felt too tight, too suffocating. My chest felt heavy. Finally, with one crack, the chain gave way. The links clattered to the floor, the heavy metal echoing through the cellar, and we all froze. The only sound now was our breathing, shallow and strained. Jack wiped the sweat from his forehead, stepping back from the door. "All right," he muttered, rolling his shoulders. "Moment of truth." With a deep breath, he braced himself against the door, and with a loud metallic groan, it began to slowly swing open,